Hey, everybody. Lieutenant Joe Pangaro here for the Blue Heart Podcast. All right. I want to first mention my sponsors right off the bat, Blue 360 Media, my publisher, who publishes the investigation, the interview, and many other things you need as a law enforcement officer. Riot Tint, which is the greatest window security covering that you can get. Go look them up. And of course, Medical Essential Diagnostics. They are a company, New Jersey based right now, that helps us all stay healthy by doing some screening at no cost to you. Medical Essential Diagnostics. Go look them up, save your life. All right, so one of the things that came up across the time of my career is the concept of surveillance. Now, we think of surveillance as a detective activity, but I got to tell you, you can certainly conduct some surveillance as a patrol officer in uniform, even in a marked car. The thing is to be out of sight and out of the way. So when I think of those kind of things, I'm trying to say, if I had to keep an eye on a suspect's apartment, the key to any kind of surveillance and being out there doing something is to have a reason to be where you are. Right? So if I wanted to look at a particular apartment, I remember the detective saying to me, hey, when you're out and about, if you can get a description of this apartment or this house or this building, could you get that for us? Because you would use that description in a search warrant. Now, of course, I pull up to the suspect's house or apartment in a marked car and I'm staring at it. It's going to be pretty obvious there's something wrong. But there's lots of reasons police cars can be in a particular area, aren't there? Right? So one of the things you might do is you might pull up in your marked car and get out with a ticket book and start looking at a car that's not related to the location that you're looking at and make like you're writing a ticket. Right? Or you got a notepad and you're taking some information down, look around at the car, all the while you're making observations of the location. Now, when it comes to a house is a little bit easier. You can be 2 or 3 doors down, and if you see somebody out front raking their leaves, and you can pull over and talk to that person. Hey, how are you, Mr. Jones? I'm Officer Jones, and I'm here to just see what's going on. How's everything in the neighborhood? Meantime, I'm looking 3 doors down at the house. And if anybody looked out the window, I would just be talking to this individual who is here, right? So we can do things like that. If it be creative is the key. But remember, the key to good surveillance is if you're going to get and watch something is to have a reason to be where you're at or be out of sight. So we did many, many cases back in the day where we had a serial burglar, right? A serial burglar. I've talked about them before. And we would find out, we think they're going to hit this neighborhood for whatever reason. Our planning tells us this might be a suspect neighborhood. So we would jump up in there and we would have an unmarked car, or we had a van that looked like a plumber's van and it had tools all over, Bob's Plumbing, and we would park that down the end of the block anywhere. It still gave us a view of the house or the location we were looking at, and we just looked like regular people. So that's, they wouldn't think that we were law enforcement. We had unmarked detective vans. We had a minivan, right? Looked like a minivan for mom and the kids, and the windows in the back were blacked out. So we put a curtain across the first set of seats behind the drivers, and then we could sit behind there, and we could actually pull up in the neighborhood and sit there for quite a while. The driver would get out and walk away, and so if anybody's watching, somebody get out of the car. There's nobody in it. The car's off. In the meantime, we're sitting in the back making observations. A little while later, when we're done, the driver gets back in the van and we drive away. When you're doing things like that, my partner Chuck and I, there were quite a few times that we used this technique. We would pull up to a location. I would get out, or he would get out, whoever was doing it. And you look under the hood of the car. You get annoyed. You get on your cell phone like you're calling somebody. And you're sitting in the car. And then a few minutes later, Chuck would pull up. We would go nose to nose, put on jumper cables, like we're trying to, jump the car to get it started. All the while, we're actually looking at the house, 2 doors down, or the apartment a couple doors down. And to the rest of the world, we just look like a couple of guys that are trying to jumpstart a car, right? In the meantime, you're all done. You take off the cables, you high five, you go different directions, and you got the observations you need. We did some late night. We had some smash and grabs, guy coming around at night, smashing store windows, going in, stealing cash registers and stuff. And again, we had vehicles that were off space, out of the way. We had a van that we could park in the lot and just looks like a van, and you can make observations all night. So you want to consider those kind of things. The last kind of thing I'll talk about when you say, I guess it's more under the idea of acting undercover, but it really goes with what I'm telling you is to have a reason to be where you're at. So we had a guy who was doing stick ups of delivery men, food delivery men, pizza, Chinese food, whatever. And he would walk into the complex and these guys would jump out on him and rob him. So I'm trying to say, how do I get in there? Now we had a surveillance team set up back so that nobody could see them. And I was the person going in there and they were watching me, right? I went to the local Domino's Pizza and I asked to borrow a Domino's jacket, a pizza box, a hat, and one of those things that went on top of the card. It said Domino's delivery. And we had a very good relationship with the owner. He said, of course, he gave us all that stuff. I put it all over an unmarked car that we had, not a Crown Victoria, an unmarked car that we had taken in forfeiture. And I pulled up into the area where these robberies were taking place. I got out and I started walking around with my pizza box. And I go around and around and around. And then after 2 or 3 nights, a couple guys jumped out with knives. Underneath the box I was holding, of course, I had my firearm. And I said, police, don't move. And everybody ran up on them. So the whole key is to have a reason to be where you are, look the part. And the last thing, don't get cop-itis. Cop-itis is when you're new at doing undercover or surveillance and you're out there and you think everybody knows I'm a cop. Everybody knows I'm a cop. That's because you're used to wearing the uniform in the parade car, driving all around. Everybody sees you. Once you start doing undercovers, plainclothes, detective work, nobody really knows you're a cop unless you tell them you're a cop. So always remember, have a reason to be where you're at, fit into the location, be creative, and get out there and see the things you need to see.